accurate.
The fault lines that we thought stopped along the coastline actually come on and go right through downtown San Diego.
Are predictions of the future coincidence or foresight? Could a catastrophic event be already building in the United States? Over the next hour, A&E will go in search of the answers to these questions. From history's archives to the findings of scientists from around the world, it's all coming up next on In Search Of. This series presents information based in part on theory and conjecture. The producer's purpose is to suggest some possible explanation, but not necessarily the only one, to the mysteries we will examine.
400 years ago, a renowned French doctor decided to put in writing strange visions that he summoned up by occult means. He believed they foretold the future, and they have become known as the prophecies of Nostradamus. Many people have trusted them completely, and even planned their lives around them. Adolf Hitler was one. The words of Nostradamus, although written 4 centuries earlier, seemed to describe Hitler uncannily.
In the court of Henry II and Catherine de' Medici, Nostradamus was believed.
Were they all deluded? Or was there some mystic formula which Nostradamus used to foresee events yet to happen?
Early in the 16th century, Nostradamus gained fame as an astrologer after he published prophecies in verse form. Nostradamus described his method of predicting the future.
Sitting alone at night in secret study, it is placed on the brass tripod. A slight flame comes out of the emptiness and makes successful that which should not be believed in vain. The wand in the hand is placed in the middle of the tripod's legs. With water, he sprinkles the hem of his garment and his foot. A voice, fear, he trembles in his robes. Divine splendor, the god sits nearby.
Since the beginning of history, advice has been sought from prophets who foretold disasters yet to come. Mankind's belief in free will and control of our own destiny sits uneasily with a suspicion that catastrophes, natural and man-made, are in some way preordained. Nostradamus himself believed that his predictions were of fates that could be avoided, destinies that could be changed. He never doubted that he was genuinely seeing the future. He chose to write his prophecies in what are known as quatrains, 4-lined rhyming verse in the Provençal dialect of southern France, which was his home. It was the time of the Inquisition, when men and women were burned for lesser heresies than the one he practiced. So he deliberately disguised and confused the quatrains, using anagrams, Latin and Greek. Specific dates are rare. Even so, his verses evoke vivid images of calamities on earth.
At sunrise, a great fire will be seen, noise and light extending towards the north. Within the globe, death and cries are heard, death awaiting them through weapons, fire and famine. greatest army on the march put to flight will scarcely be pursued further. The army reassembled and the legion reduced, they will be driven out of France completely.
He organized his quatrains in groups of 100 called centuries. Nearly 1,000 predictions have come down to us. His fame spread with extraordinary speed after publication of the first volume in 1555. At the court of Henry II and Catherine de' Medici, they were read avidly. One was of particular interest because it was thought to predict the manner of the king's death.
The young lion will overcome the older one in a field of combat in a single fight. He will pierce his eyes in their golden cage. 2 wounds in one, then he dies a cruel death.
An Italian prophet had already warned Henry II that both the beginning and end of his reign would be marked by a duel. The first duel had been fought without injury, and now it was thought that the king's jousting days were over. But the occasion of a double royal wedding of his sister and his daughter to foreign nobility proved too much of a temptation.
He faced his young lion, Count Gabriel de Montgomery.
The young lion will overcome the older one in a field of combat in a single fight.
The king wore a protective visor, according to contemporary accounts, made of gold. Was this, as Nostradamus called it, a golden cage?
A field of combat in a single fight.
The 2 horsemen raced towards each other. Montgomery, too late, tried to withdraw his lance. The lance splintered, fragments driving up under the protective gold visor. Henry II took 10 agonizing days to die from septicemia. It seemed such a striking confirmation of Nostradamus' prediction that Catherine de' Medici made him médecin du roi, a doctor and soothsayer by royal appointment. For the rest of his life, he was famed throughout Europe, and after his death in 1566, people began to interpret lines from his quatrains as referring to their own time. Erica Cheatham, a scholar of medieval French who has made a special study of Nostradamus, finds some of these supposed prophecies significant.
One of the things I find most convincing about Nostradamus, and personally made me really interested in following him through, was the fact he gave specific dates that occurred after his death. He writes that in 1666, the city of London should be destroyed by fire. He gives the date of the death of King Charles I, 1649. The Parliament put the King of London to death. Louis Pasteur, the great biologist, he not only gives his name, but in the same verse he gives the founding of the Institute, 1895.
London burnt by fire in 3 times 20 plus 6.
The Great Fire of London happened in 1666. The French Revolution in 1791.
By night he will come through the forest, 2 partners, in a roundabout way. The Queen, the White Stone. The Monk King, dressed in grey at Varennes.
Marie Antoinette, her hair turned white through shock, escaped with Louis XVI secretly through the town of Varennes.
For not wanting to consent to the divorce, which then will be recognized as unworthy, the king of the islands will be forced to flee, and one put in his place who has no sign of kingship.
King Edward VII of Britain abdicated because of his love of Mrs. Simpson and spent the rest of his life in exile. His brother George, who never expected nor wanted to become king, ruled in his place. But for those who see Nostradamus as having an outstanding prophetic gift, two names are always put forward: Napoleon, Hitler. Both names, if they were truly foreseen by Nostradamus, were disguised or coded. Napoleon was written as an anagram: Pau ne Laurent. Juggle these around, and they become Napoleon Roy, Napoleon the King. Napoleon, after his defeat at Waterloo, was exiled on the tiny island of Elba. After his escape and his victorious 100 days, a new empire began to grow for him.
Stained with murder and enormous adulteries, the great enemy of all mankind, he will be worse than his ancestors, uncles and fathers, in steel, fire and water, bloody and inhuman.
Out of nearly 1,000 such quatrains that Nostradamus wrote, how many can be interpreted as having come true? Scholars such as Erica Cheatham think the proportion is very high.
In my opinion, I think perhaps 73% is a rough average of what has come true, but remember that does cover a span of 400 years.
As Hitler advanced through Europe, his colleague Goebbels was busy orchestrating a propaganda campaign based on the 400-year-old prophecies. True or not, they were to have an effect on the strategy of the Second World War.
We'll return to In Search Of here on A&E.
To show the world how durable Nissans are, we sent our racing team to this year's Rolex 24 Hours at Daytona. They not only won, but were so far ahead they had time to pull over and wash the car, just so it would look good at the finish line. We thought waxing it would have been a bit arrogant.
To pull her through a nasty lunch, Mylanta uses aluminum and magnesium, but his antacid is Tums, and Tums has calcium.
Something my body needs anyway. I like that.
Calcium-rich Tums.
A cold always starts small, but before you know it, your cold is full grown. That's when you need Dimetap. If it was any stronger, you'd need a prescription. Dimetap Extend tabs work for 12 full hours. It's the way to relieve the congestion and sneezing of a full-grown cold. Maximum strength Dimetap Extend tabs. Relief for the full-grown cold. And for colds and flu with fever, now there's Dimetap Cold and Flu.
Haunted by the past, Joanna. Tormented by betrayal. My slut. A madman plays God. I shall have you as you were when you were young.
What makes you think that they'll love you?
Manipulating lives to recreate their passion.
But you won't be loving them. You'll be loving me.
The splitting image of one man's obsession. All I have to do is choose. The cloning of Joanna May, an American television premiere. Tonight on A&E.
My glasses are always too tight or too loose. Why can't they ever keep their fit?
You don't have to put up with glasses that don't fit anymore, because now LensCrafters has so many new ways to make glasses more comfortable.
Now LensCrafters brings you better fit for greater comfort. LensCrafters glasses fit your snug points with features like new snug fit hinges that hug your head and won't lose their gentle hold.
Now that's what I call a great fit, and they'll stay put.
LensCrafters, better fit for greater comfort in about an hour.
to pull her through a nasty lunch. Regular Rolaids uses an aluminum salt, but his antacid is Tums, and Tums has calcium.
Something my body needs anyway. I like that.
Calcium-rich Tums.
A&E returns to In Search of Nostradamus.
It was Frau Goebbels, wife of the Nazi propaganda minister, who first alerted Hitler to the strangely accurate way that Nostradamus seemed to describe events leading to the war in Europe. Ellick Howe, a former British intelligence agent, detailed to assess the influence of Nostradamus on Hitler, explains what happened.
Around the 20th of November, 1940, once Goebbels was actually sleeping at home with his wife. She was reading a book about ancient prophecies, and she was so excited about what she read about a particular prophecy which had been attributed to Nostradamus that she woke her husband up and said, Joseph, you must listen to this. There's this prophecy that there'd be a war in Poland in 1939 and this would be the end of the British Empire. And a couple of days later, Goebbels was instructing his stooges at the propaganda ministry to prepare without delay a Nostradamus leaflet for the benefit of the French in order to depress and mislead them.
No fewer than 13 quatrains seem to refer to Hitler, sometimes calling him Hister, sometimes the great or greatest leader, and describing the swastika as the crooked cross. Even before hostilities began, military leaders on the French side began to dig the Maginot Line, according to instructions apparently given by Nostradamus.
A great trench, earth excavated. The water will be divided into 15 parts.
The Nuremberg Rally and the invasion and occupation of France.
When the greatest man carried off the prize of Nuremberg, battle is joined with the French. He makes preparation. Some will regard him as good, others bad or uncertain.
Italy and the pact with Mussolini.
Not far from Venice, the two greatest ones of Asia and Africa will be said to come from the Rhine and Hitler.
Mussolini's black-clothed fascists and the pact with Hitler.
Liberty will be occupied by a black, proud, and villainous man. By Hitler, the Republic of Venice will be vexed.
Aerial warfare and the Battle of Britain.
He will use thunderbolts, so many in such an array. The machine of flying fire will come.
A skeptic would call these quatrains obscure and irrelevant. And was Nostradamus genuinely foreseeing a swastika when he wrote the following?
The great pontiff, by the warlike party, who will subjugate the borders of the Danube. The cross, pursued by hook or crook. Captives, gold, jewels, more than 100,000 rubies.
And are even the references by name to Napoleon and Hitler as accurate as they first appear? Author John Sladek does not think so.
There are hundreds of Napoleon quatrains in the prophecies, mainly because I think the 19th century French scholars kept going over and over Nostradamus and digging out anything that could be anything to do with Napoleon. But the one I noticed particularly is supposed to have an anagram of Napoleon, which is P-A-U-N-A-Y-L-O-R-O-N. If anybody can make Napoleon out of this, they're a pretty good mystic themselves. In fact, it could be an anagram of just about anything. It could be an anagram of your pal Anon. There are a number of predictions which refer to something or someone called Hister, Hister. And this is usually taken by the Nostradamus believers as Hitler. But in fact, it was a reference to the Danube River, which was called the Ister River in Nostradamus' time.
It is said in defense of Nostradamus that he made his prophecies deliberately obscure in order to escape the charges of heresy and witchcraft. Moreover, if it is possible to look into the future, everyone in history who has attempted to do so has said that the picture is uncertain and indistinct, as if they are permitted only glimpses of what might be.
Your self-fulfilling prophecy.
Ron Warmoth, modern psychic, often consulted by the business community, explains foretelling the future.
And, the true psychic part, or precognitive part, which is being able to sort of see around the bend in the river, as Einstein put it, is relatively rare, in that sense where it's completely without any sort of an input. I do believe that that we can prevent future events. I'm not a fatalist. I happen to believe that we do have free choice. And I feel that being forewarned is being forearmed, which means that if a psychic tells you something that's negative, you can change it.
If the Nostradamus predictions come true in our lifetime, might they help to establish his authenticity? They speak of actions begun by a man in France leading to a crisis in Persia, the land now called Iran. It was indeed in France that the Ayatollah Khomeini lived in exile before returning to take over from the Shah. Erica Cheatham finds this completely convincing.
When I wrote it initially, I said that this particular prediction was rubbish. It's in number 70 in Century 1. It talks of a man in a turban who shall sit in France plotting the downfall of the Emperor of Persia. Unbelievable.
Another quatrain can be taken to predict that the Prince of England will marry and that he will be the last prince on the English throne. Lastly, he seems, according to Erica Cheatham, to speak of the San Andreas Fault. A great earthquake. He gives an astrological date, the sun in 20 degrees of Taurus, which means May the 10th. He does not give the year. The overthrow of Ayatollah Khomeini, the last king of England, the eruption of the San Andreas earthquake on May the 10th. If all these happened, would it be just coincidence? One striking aspect of the prophecies of Nostradamus is that where they seem to mean something, they have often been unfulfilled. Hitler saw himself as the conqueror of Europe and Russia. Neither Nostradamus nor any of his astrologers foresaw his downfall. Napoleon believed he would win at Waterloo, as predicted by Nostradamus. He lost.
There's certain quatrains which were taken to mean the French Revolution, and then were taken to mean the Napoleonic Wars, and then were taken to mean the First World War, and then were taken to mean the Second World War. So I don't suppose anything that's that vague really is of any value at all as far as predictive power.
So far, a lot of the things he said have come true, or there has been accuracy there, because I believe he did predict the Second World War. He's predicted also to do with the massacre of the Jewish race. He also predicted a great deal to do with Hitler. He also predicted a lot of our problems we have with Russia. I mean, different things, and he has been very accurate. I mean, I think it has to speak for itself.
In the end, perhaps most prophecies mean just what the listener intends them to mean.
Possibly those rare, true glimpses of the future that some people seem to have are half coincidence and half foresight. Perhaps they owe as much to self-fulfillment as to the supernatural. We cannot be sure.
Coming up on In Search Of.
Are we going to experience some form of ultimate disaster? Will we have worldwide floods, major earthquakes? Perhaps an unexpected collision with planetary debris will trigger the ultimate catastrophe.
These things happen. They've happened in the past. We could expect them to happen again. And it may be that the timing is that we're going to see an event such as this.
Is it possible that a cataclysmic event could occur that would affect the entire human race?
Stay with us. In Search Of will return.
To show the world how durable Nissans are, we sent our racing team to this year's Rolex 24 Hours at Daytona. They not only won, but were so far ahead they had time to pull over and wash the car, just so it would look good at the finish line. We thought waxing it would have been a bit arrogant.
To pull her through a nasty lunch, Malox uses aluminum and magnesium, but his antacid is Tums, and Tums has calcium.
Something my body needs anyway. I like that.
Calcium-rich Tums.
Why take another cold and flu season lying down? At the first sign of a cold or flu, take Coricidin. It relieves your runny nose, congestion, and fever fast, and even helps stop them from getting worse. Coricidin D. The sooner, the better.
Murder most baffling. Murder to challenge the mind of a master. Put some mystery in your Mondays. Sherlock Holmes, Monday on A&E. This is your invitation to enter the world of Arts and Entertainment magazine.
Here you'll discover thought-provoking authors, reviews of the finest in performing arts and literature,
Highlights from the latest in music, home videos, and motion pictures.
and in-depth profiles of today's most intriguing personalities.
All the drama, the wonder, the beauty you've come to expect from the A&E network can be found in Arts and Entertainment magazine.
Plus beautiful color photography, challenging crossword puzzles,
And an expanded, improved program guide that takes you behind the scenes of the best in television.
To receive your 12 monthly issues for only $18 a year, send a check or money order to Arts and Entertainment Magazine, P.O. Box 2071, Knoxville, Iowa, 50197, 2071.
Or use your credit card and call toll-free 1-800-238-2800.
A&E returns to In Search Of.
Are we going to experience some form of ultimate disaster? Will we have worldwide floods, major earthquakes? Perhaps an unexpected collision with planetary debris will trigger the ultimate catastrophe.
These things happen. They've happened in the past. We could expect them to happen again. And it may be that the timing is that we're going to see an event such as this.
Is it possible that a cataclysmic event could occur that would affect the entire human race? Could this ultimate disaster happen in our lifetime? We tend to think of catastrophic events occurring on a limited regional basis, not worldwide. Yet the yearly toll of destruction by earth, air, fire, and water is immense. Earthquakes have been on the increase around the globe since 1976. In that year alone, more than 800,000 people lost their lives, and millions of dollars worth of property was destroyed. In one day in 1974, tornadoes killed or injured 6,300 people, and left $600 million worth of damage in 13 states. Serious volcanic eruptions have occurred in 4 regions of our planet so far this past year. 200 square miles of the Pacific Northwest were devastated by the eruption of Mount St. Helens in 1980. Nearly 300 people were caught by a tidal wave at Hilo, Hawaii in 1960. Property damage amounted to more than $40 million. In 1979, 200 people were killed by a giant wave in Indonesia. Are these disasters merely a prelude to larger events that may occur? Experts were asked if an ultimate disaster could be a part of our future. Some find this a very real possibility. Archaeologist, geologist Jeffrey Goodman, author of We Are the Earthquake Generation.
What is coming up for the future? This has always been a theme. The Bible has talked about it. It seems that in the close of every millennium, people are particularly concerned. At the end of, when 1000 AD was coming up, people were concerned that that was going to be the end of the world. And since then, I think Western society is particularly sprinkled with ideas about there's going to be a big event. It may be that as we're moving towards an ice age, which a lot of climatologists believe we are, that the amount of ice and snow cover in the North Pole area will get so great, and also in the South Pole, that it will contribute to the instability of the Earth. And we know that large earthquakes do move the Earth on its axis. And it may be a combination of forces of the instability from the ice and snow cover, the striking of a meteor, large quakes causing jostling, a number of factors coming together to produce what I think is, or has been referred to as the ultimate event, and that's the Earth actually turning over in space, turning on its hinges.
The Stell Group is a new community established in the farmlands south of Chicago under the leadership of Richard Kenninger. One of their concerns is how to deal with the catastrophe they feel may occur at the turn of the century. Physicist Tim Wilhelm, Stell's vice president, describes the 3 factors they feel could cause the ultimate disaster.
The South Polar ice mass would begin increasing in size and weight, and would do so in an off-center fashion. In other words, it would not all be equally balanced around the axis, rotational axis of the Earth, but it would be offset. And just like putting balancing weights on a tire, if your tire on your car is out of balance, it tends to make it jump and bounce. And this supposedly would have the same effect. This off-center mass of ice would cause what's called the Earth's precessional wobble. The Earth precesses as it rotates. It also wobbles slightly. And with this heavy weight on one side, it would cause that to exaggerate slightly. That exaggerated wobble would put a stress force on the crust of the Earth.
The second factor is the cooling in the core of the Earth.
As with all physical matter, as it cools, it shrinks. Now, the plastic underlayment, the mantle of the Earth, being more fluid-like or plastic-like, can shrink at a continual rate. But the crust of the Earth is rigid and cannot readily conform to this shrinking mantle. And what happens is as the underlayment is shrinking away, you get sort of a buckling of the crust, which along fault lines there are instabilities. And to equalize, the crust will shift, and that is what an earthquake is.
Fault lines form a web covering every area of the Earth. The third factor,
the predicted planetary alignment, which is to occur on or near the date May 5 of the year 2000. Now, this planetary alignment will not be a super straight line of all the planets through space. There will be several of the farther out planets off at about 90 degrees, but most of what are termed the visible planets will be in a fairly straight line shot through the heavens. Now, it's been calculated many times over that when all the planets line up, the gravitational distortion that's created, the added gravitational pull, is not necessarily strong enough to have any major effect. But there have been studies done which show that the sun and the moon lining up alone can cause the Earth's crust to heave by more than a foot up and down, and it creates literal tides in the crust of the Earth. So gravitation does have some effect. So with the instability caused by this added wobble due to the ice mass being off-center and growing, plus the instability of the crustal arches being somewhat buckled due to the cooling and shrinking of the Earth, you add this final hair trigger at the right point in time, and that would trigger a chain of geological, geophysical events, which could be termed a cataclysm.
We'll return to In Search Of here on A&E.
To show the world how durable Nissans are, we sent our racing team to this year's Rolex 24 Hours at Daytona. They not only won, but were so far ahead they had time to pull over and wash the car, just so it would look good at the finish line. We thought waxing it would have been a bit arrogant.
To pull her through a nasty lunch, my Lanta uses aluminum and magnesium, but his antacid is Tums, and Tums has calcium.
Something my body needs anyway. I like that.
Calcium-rich Tums.
I actually had an AT&T rep call up a couple months ago and try to get me to switch to AT&T.
They call us all the time. Come back, we'll switch you for free. There is no incentive because nothing can beat what we have.
The basic service for MCI is cheaper than AT&T in the long run, so you're saving there. And then you have the added bonus of saving an additional 20% for anybody that's in your circle.
I was aware of what they were saying about going back to AT&T. I can't imagine doing it.
Lovejoy discovers that time is money.
Love letters and ladies. Found them in the club.
And then he's struck by an idea.
I could only get away with it.
But is it the right stuff?
The letters are fakes.
They certainly are not.
He puts the letters to the test. But first...
Switch them? I had to.
Now everyone's really ticked off.
Dirty Harry wouldn't worry about a formality like that.
Lovejoy, a true original. Monday on A&E.
If we can work together to reach for the stars, if we can band together to fight for rights and freedom, and inspire people around the world to fight for theirs, then we can join together, not just to compete, but to lead.
Let's invest in ourselves, our children, and our economic future. Make education our national priority.
Ricola, the all-natural herb cough drop imported from Switzerland. Ricola has been soothing throats and relieving coughs naturally for over 60 years. A&E returns to In Search Of the Ultimate Disaster.
The interesting thing, in the last 10 years, within the professional field of geology, geologists are resorting more and more to catastrophic explanations to explain how the Earth got to be the way it is, to explain why mountain ranges are there and why there are changes and why there are certain river basins and such. We now talk about how the glaciers once careened across the state of Washington to scour out the topography of lakes and scablands that we see in the central part of the state. We talk about periods of time when there were volcanic eruptions going around the Earth, the whole planet at once. All the volcanoes were spouting during the same period of time. We're talking about how meteors have periodically hit the Earth. The latest current theory is from Dr. Alvarez at UCLA, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, who says that the Earth was hit by a meteor or an asteroid 65 million years ago. This more or less turned the lights out on the Earth. There was a big cloud of dust. We know that was so because we have the element iridium that only comes from outer space, found in all the geological layers around the Earth. And we think that this event was responsible for the extinction of the dinosaurs. That suddenly, the dinosaurs didn't slowly die out, but they suddenly, catastrophically died out. And there was a great event that took place. And the thing that is a little unnerving to me is that we're seeing that it's much more the rule now, and we're seeing more and more catastrophic events having to explain things. In our space shots, we've gone off to Mars. What were we greeted with? Earthquakes. Since then, we thought all the volcanoes on Mars were extinct. Turns out there are active volcanoes on Mars. We went by Saturn, and we passed by its little satellite, its little moon, Io. There were 7 volcanic eruptions going off at once. So I think we, in professional geology, have woefully underplayed the role of catastrophic events. And as we're finding out about the realities of events, it makes the traditional views, the psychic views, the intuitive views, that much more real, that much more possible.
Could a catastrophic event be already building in our own western United States in the form of a major earthquake? Scientists are studying new information, hoping to find the answer before it is too late.
We know that there's bulging going up and down in the Palmdale area of California. We know there have been swarms of earthquakes there. We know that San Diego has recently experienced earthquakes, and the fault lines that we thought stop along the coastline actually come on and go right through downtown San Diego.
The San Andreas Fault slashes across 700 miles of California. It creates a volatile earthquake zone stretching between San Diego and San Francisco.
Up in San Francisco, there's a great deal of change that has taken place within the last 2 years, and that the San Andreas Fault in that area is now changed the nature of its pressure. It's been under compression. That means the 2 parts of the fault have been pressing against each other, and it's been very hard to have an earthquake there while they're pressing against, because for an earthquake you need one chunk of rock to slide past another very quickly, and this gives you your tremendous energy release. But right now they have noticed that the fault is actually in expansion. The 2 halves are coming apart, and that's going to make it much, much easier to have a big earthquake occur there.
Some scientists believe in the interconnection of geophysical events. Earthquake activity may release power from deep within the earth, resulting in volcanic eruption.
We just had the eruption of Mount St. Helens, and we have always known that the Cascade Range is a very dangerous range. It's a very young mountain range. We've looked at St. Helens, which was really a pipsqueak of a volcanic eruption. There have been eruptions at Tambora that have been hundreds of times as large. And indeed, just 6,000 years ago, there was a Mount Mazama. Remember Mount Mazama? Well, it was where Crater Lake is now. And literally, the whole mountain blew up and threw ash as far east as into the plain states of Kansas and Nebraska.
Given the very real possibility of a catastrophic event, will we be given time to react to an approaching global disaster? Dr. Goodman believes there will be a series of events which serve as a warning sequence.
And it begins with a great deal of destruction to Japan, earthquakes, the island of Japan being really ravaged over. And then activity in Italy, Vesuvius, the volcano, it erupting. And then the activity moving over across the ocean to the Caribbean, where Mount Pelee is, on the Isle of Martinique. And then the west coast of the United States, California, being hit. And then the burners of the earth, so to speak, being turned up to high gear. We'd see the California coastline start to be crumbling away and be pushed back inland. And we'd see even warning earthquakes in such areas that we don't normally think of earthquakes, such as St. Louis, New York City, increasingly harsh weather patterns, food shortages in the U.S., and then by 1990 to 2000 would be the really devastating period. And here we're talking about earthquakes that would be literally over 10 on the Richter scale, bigger than anything anybody imagined.
Beyond the advent of the geological changes and hazards already identified, could it be that the ultimate catastrophe will come from outside the Earth itself?
Next, did an ancient civilization not only have knowledge of prehistoric disasters, but future catastrophes as well? We'll find out when In Search Of continues.
In Switzerland, Ricola has been soothing sore throats and relieving coughs naturally for over 60 years. Ricola is a blend of 10 organically grown alpine herbs and natural flavors, providing pleasant-tasting natural relief. Ricola, the natural choice for soothing sore throats and relieving coughs naturally.
Premier's Big Red Boat. If you're going to Walt Disney World, it's the only way to go. Premier's Big Red Boat. The official cruise line of Walt Disney World.
BMW reminds you there's more to life than a bigger office. Is this the year you experienced BMW motorcycles?
These slip down one more time. I'm fed up with glasses that don't fit.
You don't have to put up with glasses that don't fit anymore. Because at Lens Crafters, we have so many new ways to make glasses more comfortable.
Lens Crafters glasses fit your snug points with features like new snug fit hinges that hug your head and won't lose their gentle hold. Lens Crafters, for that cushion of comfort you've always wanted.
I never knew glasses could be this comfortable.
Lens Crafters, better fit for greater comfort in about an hour.
Late night. To you, it's just a TV show. To us, it's a living hell.
It's a TV viewing experience.
Tonight at 7 Eastern on A&D.
Experience the drama, the wonder, the beauty.
All you've come to expect from the A&E Network can now be found in Arts and Entertainment magazine.
Here you'll discover enlightening articles, intriguing personalities,
And an expanded, improved program guide that takes you behind the scenes of the best in television.
To subscribe to Arts and Entertainment magazine, call 1-800-238-2800.
Have your credit card handy when you call.
A&E returns to In Search of the Ultimate Disaster.
Zecharia Sitchin is the author of The 12th Planet and The Stairway to Heaven. He believes that the writings of ancient Sumerians, which tell a story of prehistoric catastrophe, may in fact foretell our future.
Fortunately, the Sumerians have left us not only very detailed writings which speak for themselves, but also pictorial evidence. This seal is very interesting. It actually depicts the whole solar system with the sun in the center, not the Earth, showing all the planets that are known to us today, plus one more between Mars and Jupiter, of which we are not aware. The planet which I call the 12th planet and which the ancient peoples called Marduk was caught in sun orbit into our solar system by having come out from outer space, was pulled in by the gravity force of all the other planets into the solar system and collided with another ancient member of the solar system called Tiamat. In the collision, Tiamat was split in two. One half of it became the asteroid belt and the comets. The other half, which was pushed into a new orbit, became the planet on which we live, planet Earth. Marduk itself, which was now caught into solar orbit, has adopted a very large, long elliptical orbit, almost comet-like, which brings it once every 3,600 years between Mars and Jupiter.
Is this possible? Could there be another planet in our system that approaches Earth every 3,600 years?
this basic tenet in my writings, which was central to the beliefs of the ancient peoples, that there is indeed one more planet in our solar system, has been in the past 2 years or so accepted in a way by astronomers, especially those at the U.S. Naval Observatory in Washington, who have concluded that there is indeed one large planet beyond Pluto.
Dr. Robert Harrington of the U.S. Naval Observatory does confirm the recent appearance of another planet orbiting beyond Pluto. This planet is believed to be 3 to 5 times larger than Earth.
Given then that such a planet indeed exists and that it may come and cause havoc in the future, it's very interesting to read the Sumerian evidence of what happened on one of those previous passages when the deluge took place on Earth. The first effects were a very strong wind and a darkened sky. The nearing of that planet and its gravitational pull have shifted the ice cap of Antarctica off the landmass of Antarctica, creating the huge tidal wave that has engulfed our globe and that has remained in human memory as the deluge or the great flood of the Bible, of Noah, and of the Sumerian tales.
Could Sumerian mythology be our history? Has our Earth actually been the victim of past global catastrophe? Would we be prepared to face an ultimate disaster? Dr. Jeffrey Goodman.
There are a lot of contingencies and ramifications that could take place should these types of events start to occur. And really, it doesn't need the whole place getting shaken up or torn up. 1 or 2 earthquakes will do just fine. I think this country stood and watched in amazement when we saw the earthquake that hit Italy.
November 23rd, 1980. An earthquake measuring 7.2 on the Richter scale devastated an area of south-central Italy, killing 3,000 people.
And we watched it on our news broadcast, and we were very sympathetic and empathetic. And we sent aid, and we said, boy, these poor people, they weren't ready to cope with this. The Japanese have admitted that they're in a great earthquake threat, and in the Tokyo area and along that coastline from outside of Tokyo, they already have named the big quake. They call it the Tokai quake, and they expect it to come soon, and they're talking about tremendous loss of life, 250,000 homes being lost, tremendous destruction from fire, tremendous loss from a resultant tidal wave that would come with the event, and they're making very, very definite preparations. They've put up enough food and water to supply Tokyo for 10 days. They're spending a tremendous amount of money on preparedness. And similarly, now here in this country, we have various groups that have been putting out newsletters, monitoring all the information, and getting together to move to certain areas or within the area they are, become better prepared for the possibility of an event.
One purpose of the STEL group is to develop a new self-sufficient culture that would survive following a catastrophe. Tim Wilhelm.
One of the ways we see of doing that is developing as many capabilities right here within the community as we can. For example, we have our own water treatment plant, which is a reverse osmosis system, the kind used for desalinating seawater. We also are working under a grant from the U.S. Department of Energy, developing a community-sized fuel alcohol plant. Obviously, a task of this nature is incredible in scope and a very ambitious undertaking, to say the least. And we've looked at alternatives like building concrete bunkers and going underground for a while. And we've also looked at the alternative of lifting above the surface of the Earth in some sort of an aircraft or hovercraft or hovering aircraft, whatever you choose to call it. And we don't know what it is yet. We're just looking at that as the possible alternative.
Technological advancement in the last 100 years is remarkable. We have developed machinery to aid us in our physical labor, computers to augment our minds. There have been incredible advances in communication and medicine. We've landed on the moon, on Mars, and on Venus. We're sailing into the far reaches of our solar system. Modern technology has carried us into an era of wonders. Tomorrow holds endless promise, yet it is clouded by a threat. Some scientists feel that we may face cataclysmic events in our lifetime. Given that possibility, there are those who believe that some of our technological resources must be applied toward mankind's survival of the ultimate disaster.
Apart from a catastrophe on Earth, limited or due to our own position in the heavens and the fact that another planet comes periodically, is there something in the solar system, perhaps in the whole universe, that keeps repeating itself? That a civilization arises, life can become possible, evolve on a planet, a stage arises, there's a very high civilization, but it brought its own ruin perhaps on itself, and then somebody gets into spaceships and goes to another planet and starts it all over again. In other words, is the past the future?
Tonight, WKRP in Cincinnati's Frank Bonner brings some laughs to L.A. on A&E's An Evening at the Improv. Now, stay tuned for Air Combat, next on A&E.